Hello and welcome back. It's puzzle time with Sudoku Sleuth, and today we're going to be playing Whirlwind. So it's a puzzle from another constructor that I actually haven't come across today. Previously, Braveheart. Looks like my type of puzzle. When I say my type of puzzle, I think not lost on you guys that I absolutely love Anti-Knight, and I'm not necessarily great at it. So when I come across one that is a 1-star difficulty rated, fantastically rated, 94% as of the time of recording, and is also anti-king, I feel like it'll be an excellent puzzle where we get to enjoy the anti-knight part, and it's a little bit easier because it's also anti-king. Looks like quite a bit of fun, just the way that it's constructed, but rather than sort of take my word for it, let's take a look together at today's puzzle, Whirlwind from Braveheart. And the reason I'm sort of saying that looks like a bit of fun, I don't know, maybe I'm going to sort of talk about that when I'm actually starting to solve. But you can see that it's almost like there is a bit of a whirlwind going on, almost like an effect with kind of the even numbers around the middle, the odd numbers around the outside, and it's sort of almost like twisting like a tornado. Fascinating puzzle. Feels like it really shouldn't solve with just how sparse it is in terms of clues, but very powerful anti-knight and anti-king. Quick reminder of what these rules mean. Of course, you know what normal Sudoku means. Place the digits 1 to 9 once each in every row. Every column, of course, every 3 by 3 box. Then, of course, we've got the anti-king and anti-knight. So, this 4, for example, of course cannot be in the same box because of Sudoku. Not in the same column, not in the same row. But also, anything that is a chess king's move away cannot be a 4 either. Secondarily, anything that is an anti-knight, as in a knight's move away, so chess knight is that L shape, 2 steps forward, 1 step to the side. Obviously that cell, this cell, that cell, 2 steps. Yep, again, 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 and obviously in the same box as well, if I can. So you end up with an extraordinarily large amount of the grid that cannot be the same digit. That is a huge amount of the grid. So really looking forward to today's puzzle. As always, you know what to do if you want to play along. Link in the description down below for you to do so. And with that said, I'm going to restart the clock, see how I get on. Sorry, am I recording? Yeah, I am. Okay. Right. So, observation, and I've been trying to do this a lot more than I've done historically, is I think I sort of jump into things immediately. And I really think what I should be doing more and more often is just taking a minute to understand to some degree how the puzzle has been constructed and therefore kind of what the intended solution path is. And I'm immensely suspicious, of how the even digits are all surrounding box 5. And the reason is that cells that are like close to the box edge, kind of those 3 by 3 boxes, because of the anti-knight and anti-king, they have like an extraordinary amount of coverage in terms of what cannot be placed. So, using this 8, for example, none of these cells could be 8. In fact, let's use an example. This cell cannot be 2, 4, 6, or 8. And therefore, it has to be 1, 3, 5, 7, or 9. Now, obviously, with rotational symmetry, which I know you guys are not necessarily always a fan of, I know this is going to be a 5, but we're not going to use that today because it's not stated in the rules. The second thing that I'm kind of noticing is that it's just like a huge section of this box 5 cannot be an 8. And, there's a bit of a pattern here. So intuitively, I'm basically thinking start with the even digits, and then once we place the even digits, what I'm hoping for is that there will be, because we're only given one of each digit, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, we're even skipping the 5, 7, 8, 9. So essentially, we're going to place the even digits. Hopefully, we're going to be able to place a bunch of them. And then subsequently, what I'm hoping for is that the odd digits are basically going to slot in some fairly obvious places because of what's filled in by the even digits. And then the remaining gap is basically going to be the 5. So let's give that a go. 2. Obviously, none of these are 2s. None of these are 2s. Just going to sort of think around where 2s can be. And in fact, there you go. 2 and the 3, that is useful. Think about box 3. So Sudoku says none of these. King's move says none of that. Knight's move says none of these. 2 can only be in this column. Very powerful. 2, in fact, cannot be here because of King's move, here because of Knight's move, here because of Knight's move. These 2 are basically excluding here, and therefore the 2 is restricted. And again, the 2 is restricted. Fairly sure this cell will not work because it would see both of these with king and then knight, so that cell doesn't work. And you can already see how this is going to start to help, I think. I hope. Let's keep going. 2 is none of these. In fact, actually, I am going to do something odd. I'm going to pencil mark box 5 because I think it's going to be relevant. None of these could be 2. You know, Sudoku, king move, knight move. So 2 is in here, and therefore there's going to be a few restrictions. But let's play that through. Sudoku says no 2s. Knight move with these 2 and Sudoku says neither are these 2. Essentially, if this cell is a 2, it can see this with Sudoku and knight move. Same Sudoku, knight move. So none of these are 2s. This cell is not a 2 because it can see this cell with Sudoku, this cell with king's move, and this cell with knight move. So no 2s. 2s are in here. No 2s. 2. Not a 2. 2. Yeah, we're on the right track. Not a 2. Knight move. 2. 2. Beautiful. Not in these 3. I mean, obviously, Sudoku, Sudoku, knight move. 2's in here. 2's in there. Therefore, 2 is restricted to these 2 column in the column just because of how these 2 line up in column 1 and 2. And that's as far as I can go. Now, I'm very tempted to basically just flip this around and do the 8s quickly. Really tempted because of the rotational symmetry and the interest of time to basically just fill in where the 8s are going to be. But let's prove it. So no 8s in here. We know that because of Sudoku and then knight move. Actually start with the 7 like we did with the 3 up here. So no 8, no 8 knight move, no 8 king's move, no 8 knight move. 8 is in here. No 8s, knight move, king's move, knight move. 8 is in there. 8 has to be up here. Can't be this cell because it would see both of them. So this is a 2-8 pair. And then this 8 removes all of these. This cell is removed because it would see all 3 options in box 5. These 2 remove these 2 cells, and then 8 is in here, which removes, I'm going to say all of these cells. This cell as well, surprisingly, because of, again, king's move and chess move. And then we're kind of restricted to these 3 cells. That doesn't look as helpful. I don't know why that's different. I'm probably missing something. What am I missing? Of course, yeah, in here, the 8s. Oh, hang on. 8s, 8s. Row 1 and 2 can't be 8s. Excuse me. So needed that in row 3. So no 8s because of these. King's move. No 8s because of knight move. These cells see all of the options in box 5, as do this. And in fact, I could have just looked at the fact they line up in rows 4 and 5. Therefore, the 8 is down here. Again, they line up in columns 8 and 9. It's got to be in one of these 2 cells. This cell tells me that's the 8. That's not an 8. That's the 8. Have I genuinely got less? Feels, oh, of course, because I'm just not using Sudoku. So 8s, no 8s. 8, not an 8. 8, not an 8. Therefore, it's a 2 and an 8. And presumably that I've landed this 2. Yeah, I've got both the 2s and 8s here. So I think they all pretty much line up at this point. Other than this is not an 8. If I can type, therefore this is an 8. And we should have 8 X-wings and then 2 X-wings. Yeah, we're good. Why is this? Yeah, I'm not doing Sudoku, that's why. Good. Now, is there something going on similarly with the 4 and 6? I'm not as certain, if I'm honest. So the 8 and the 7 had kind of like a real interaction here where it was forced in the corner. The 4 doesn't feel it. Really doesn't feel it. Actually, box 5 is more interesting now that, excuse me, the 2 and the 8 are placed. So the 4, none of these cells, not in here, not there, it can only be restricted to there. I'm going to do the 4s and the 6s in parallel just to save time, like I said. I may actually have to pause for a second. So no 4s, no 4, no 4, no 4. 4 in one of 3 cells. No 4s, 4 in one of 3 cells. Where is it in row 3? It's got to be in here. Sadly, there's quite a few different spaces. It's proving a bit trickier, the 4s and 6s. No 4s. Yeah, lots of places for 4s. No 4s. This cell sees both. So 4 is restricted to here. Yeah. So 4 removes all of these. 4 removes all of these. 4 is restricted to there. That is not a 4. 4 in here. Can't be the cell. Can't be down there. That's still a lot of options. None of these. In fact, none of these. This is trickier. Sorry, I'm going to have to pause for a second. I'll be right back. Let me pose the puzzle first, and then we'll pick it up in a second. Right, so back again. And admittedly, it's even like an entirely different day. So picking this up almost 24 hours later, or however much it is, 16 hours later, it's going to be a little bit strange. So give me a second whilst I try and remember what I was doing or trying to do. Yeah, not sure. Not sure. I'm guessing I was working on the 4s and 6s, but I can see that the 4 is not proving particularly easy to place. No, it is actually. Right, so think about the 4 in box 5. These 2 cells both see this one with anti-king and knight. So this cell is not available in box 9, meaning once again the 4s are lining up in rows 8 and 9. Where's the 4 then in row 7? It can only be in one of these 2 cells to make this a 2-4 pair. Excellent. And presumably I can do the same thing with the 6s. I'm kind of a bit disappointed. I generally thought I'm going to be able to place more 4s than I have been so far. Right, so let's do the same thing with the 6s. So no 6, no 6, no 6, no 6, 6 in one of these 3 cells, I guess mirroring what we're doing at the top. No 6, 6. One of these 3, again, not brilliant. Where is 6 now in row 7? Because it's clearly not in any of these cells because it sees them all. So that has to be a 6. Right, that is not a 6 then. That is a 6. That removes a huge amount of the top 2 boxes, 1 and 2. So none of these are 6s. I say a huge amount. Apparently not. And all 4 of these. Why is it 4 here and only for the 4 down there? Right, let's have a think. 6s, 6s, 6, and 6 with the anti-knight. So 6. So 6 is restricted to one of these 2 cells. Brilliant. These 2 probably see a significant portion. I mean, they can certainly see both of these. Actually, it doesn't matter. Sudoku says none of them. In fact, I need it once again in row 3 because they're lining up in rows 2 and 3. And this cell is not going to be it. So it's essentially in here with an 8. So this is a 6-8 pair, which allows me to immediately place the 4. Excellent. And then that is not a 4, meaning 4 is in one of these 2 cells. So these are not 4s. That's a 4. That's a 2. That's a 4. That's a 2. Right. this is going to crack, I think, anytime soon. So the 4s, that is not a 4, that's a 4. Excellent. And I think we've just about placed all the 4s, just about. Kind of a 4 X-Wing. Actually, no, not a 4. Is a 4, not a 4. That 4 with night move means that's not a 4, that is a 4, that's not a 4, that's a 4. We've placed all the 4s, and I imagine we're probably going to be able to do the same thing with the 6s if I pay attention again. How did I place the 4s but not the 6s? It's just, like, again, it just doesn't make sense. And I'm probably missing something obvious that would allow me to do it. So strange. Maybe it's because I placed the 2 and it helped me unlock something. I don't know. So the 8s are kind of stuck between these two X-Wings. I'm going to just cheat a bit to point out to myself. Right, so we placed this 4 and 2, which helps. And what else? I've also placed that 4 and 6. All right, okay. What am I missing? What logic have I missed to stop me here? Yeah, I'm not getting it. I'm going to persist rather than just assuming rotational symmetry on the off chance that I made a mistake with the 4. I don't think I have. It was all fairly obvious, I'm going to say. So we placed all the 2s and 4s, presumably, in every box. Yeah. And then the 8s, we've got 7 of them, and then obviously the 2 X-Wings. Okay. 6s, maybe I just haven't pencil marked them all. Well, it really looks like I have. So what's going on in this corner? Why did I manage to place that 4 and not that 6? So if I place 6s here, then obviously I have to place this 6, that 6, that 6, and that 6. So this seems entirely valid to me. Of course not. Anti-knight move. Right. That's why. And then knight. Done. Right. So we've done all the evens as we suspected. Now we're getting onto the odd digits. And then essentially, I'm guessing one of them is going to be a lot easier to play. So let's just see the obvious things. 3 can only be in one of these 2 cells. Therefore, can only be in one of these 3 cells. Can't be here because of knight move. 1 has to be in here. And therefore, in one of these 2 cells. So far, no luck. No 1s. That's not great. Yeah, that's not what I'm not at all what I had in mind. Okay, let's play some tricks. This cell can't be a 1 because it would see all of them. And then same is true for here, it would see both of these. So 1s are as such. Okay, maybe it's not the 1 and 3 to help me progress. But if it's not the 1 and 3, it's not going to be the 7 and 9. So I'm going to persist here. I mean, 3 seems to be all over the place. One of these 2 cells is a 3. Therefore, that's not a 3. Because it would see it with king move and knight move. No, it won't. No. 3 here. That is not a 3. That's semi-helpful. King move, knight move. So 3 would be restricted to one of these 4 cells. means that is not a 3 because it would see all of them. But essentially, one of these 4 is a 3. This can't be a 3 because it would see everything in box 5. This isn't a 3. 3 is in one of 3 cells. Not brilliant. Now, clearly, one of these 3 cells is a 3 in row 4, which is hardly enough. I'm going to focus on the ones for a second. Not that it's necessarily helpful. One's in here. What does it do to box 5? So this can't be a 1. This can't be a 1. That surely is helpful. And this cell also can't be a 1 because we see both of them. So essentially, in column 4, the only place for a 1 is here. And therefore, in box 5, the only place for a 3, that's correct, isn't it? It's not this cell. Yep, it's there. And therefore, it's not this cell. It's got to be one of these 2, so it's not this cell. Where is it in row 6? It's got to be one of these 3, so it's not this 3. It's not this 3. Excellent so far. Knight move. Not this 3. Can we do anything with this box? Probably. Not really. Yeah, not sure. So this can't be a 1 either, because it would see both of these. This can't be a 1. So 1s down here are in there, meaning that's not a 1. It would see all of them. Not 1s. So 1s are in one of these 2 cells, meaning neither of these are a 1. So now column 4 is starting to become, and neither is this one, because again, it would see all of these. So 1 in column 7 can only be in here. No 1s. That doesn't work because it would see all 3. So 1s are down here, and that's enough. That is not this. That's a 1. That's not a 1. That's a 1. That can't be a 1 anymore. That's a 1. 1 in here. Not 1. 1. And then suddenly we're done with... not quite. Yeah, but yes. We're done with all the 1s. 9s are going to be the same. Let's just move on. Focus on 3s. So one of these 3 is a 3. This 3 is a problem. Just let me show you what I mean by that. Essentially, we'd remove it from here from box 4. And again, it would remove it from there from box 7. And then suddenly, the 3s would line up in column 1. Bit hard to see, but that's not a 3. So where is it in column 4? It can only be in this cell, which means that's not a 3. That's a 3. One of these 2 is a 3. That means neither of these are 3s now. 3 is in here. Both see this cell. So that's a 3. Not a 3. That's a 3. And of course, I just didn't follow through. That's not a 3. 3. Done. And of course, not a 3. And same is going to be the same for the 7 and 9. I'm genuinely interested in kind of in the interest of time, just to sort of fill in all the rest of the digits feels more appropriate than sort of trying to work it all out. But I suspect you guys will not kind of let that one slide. I mean, 7s is one here, 7s is in there. We can do a whole bunch of things because this cell can see both of them. So the 7s are not here. It's one of these 2 is a 7. That can't be it because of knight move. That's a 7. That's not a 7. And that is knight move. That's a 7. That's a 5. In here is 5, 9. That is 7, 9. That is 5, 9. That can't be a 5. That's 9. That's 5, 9, 5. Don't know. Neither are 5 because of this 5. So that's a 7-9 pair, and then in the row that's a 5. That's another 7-9. That is 5-7. In the column as well, 5-7. 7-9. I'm just going to pencil mark them and just eliminate them later. That seems to be able to see a lot, so I'm going to skip it for now. In the column here, that's 7-9. It can't be a 5. It's got to be, like I did with the 7, there's probably something about... No, this is 7, not the 9. Let's have a think. I didn't actually use this 9 at all, seemingly. No 9. So this is 5-7. In the column as well, 5-7. In here, that's 5-9. And in here, that's 7-9. Oh, 9. There you go. 7, 9, 5, 7, 9, 5, 7, 5, 9, 7, 5, 9, 7. That has to be a 5, 9, 7. And if I've not made any other mistakes, 9 for the finish. It's a phenomenal puzzle. It's an absolutely phenomenal puzzle from Braveheart. Fantastic construction. I'm liking the whole idea of kind of thinking through the intended solution path at the beginning. Feels a little bit more enjoyable as opposed to sometimes the haphazard approach that I take. So expect more of that in the future. Hope you guys enjoyed the puzzle and the video, and I'll see you back soon. Bye-bye for now.